So I have two specific tips for dividing duties in the household, but it's really important that we bear in mind the two principles I've already spoken of, the two more general principles of dividing duties in the household, namely that we divide specific duties because we're undivided in love and commitment, and we divide duties in order to be united in one household project. So those two principles are behind this more concrete approach now. So my two tips are this: recognize non-sex specific duties and divide them fairly. Second tip, recognize sex specific duties and divide them accordingly. And these two tips are going to have to be kind of interwoven. So I go back to the first one. There are clearly many works, duties, things that need to be done in the household that are non-sex specific, right? Keeping the house clean, right? This is not a sex specific thing. And doing dishes, obviously, is not a sex specific thing. So there's all kinds of work that's going to need to be done that we're going to look at and just have to say, how are we going to divide this up fairly? Is it 50-50? Is it 60-40? Is it 70-30? Or then, given what we're going to look at in the second tip, maybe some of those ones here are going to be divided, more even 90-10, given what's going on in the sex specific. But considering those in themselves, I think it's important to recognize we need to take a very fair approach to how we're going to divide them up, because there isn't a sex specificity here. The trickier thing to discern is the sex specific works and duties. And here I start by saying, I think we need to be ready to see something anew or to look anew. Are we willing to be humble? Are we willing to recognize that maybe our nature experience is saying something to us that we haven't seen yet? So just kind of starting with that. There's not any list of sex-specific duties that I'm going to suggest here or just kind of roll out. But I am going to give a couple of examples I think will help us think about this. Spending time with very young children. Experience shows, empirical data shows, the greater need, especially of younger children, for the presence consistently of the mother. So here is a more sex-specific thing that as we're thinking about, okay, if we're having children here, how are we going to divide up the works? Well, it's not just, okay, well, we'll just kind of, divide things in whatever way. We need to have asked this question. Well, if this is something where the children need more of their mother in a consistent daily way, this can make a very big difference in how things get divided up. Here's another example. Making known, promulgating, enforcing or following up on rules, I think is more of a masculine specific thing. Now let me make something clear that applies to any of these things that we're calling sex specific. It's not as though this means only that sex is going to do it, only that person is going to do it. But it does probably mean there's going to be a little bit more time, a little bit more energy, a little more attention needed, called for from that specific parent. So this as regards the kind of keeping order in the household. There is something, I'm not going to give an argument for it now, I'm just suggesting it though as a possible example, that it's going to be for the best order and flourishing of the household, that the man take the lead in this, in promulgating, doesn't mean that he decided what they are by himself, but in promulgating them and then following up. And by enforcement, I don't necessarily mean punishment. That's another topic. All I mean is really conveying, we expect that this be done. Here are certain things about how we live together. So I'm suggesting then those two examples. Again, bearing in mind that it's always a unified project. This is always something that we are working on together, that we aid one another and we support one another in. But going back to what I said about the first tip, it might be the case as we sort out those sex-specific ones, that we might need to then divide up those non-sex-specific ones differently. Quick, obvious one, mother needs to be spending more time with the infant. Maybe dad simply does all the diapers because, to kind of free her up. Or dad does all the cleaning. Dad does all the cooking and dishes and something like that. If there's a need for a father to be away, to attend to certain kinds of things, certain professional needs, whatever that might be, that maybe now that does call upon a woman to have to do certain things that otherwise would have been divided in a different way. Again, this is just part of our looking at how we're going to divide this up in a reasonable way, always bearing in mind, we are 100% in this together, and we are blessed to make this one life project, this thing called household. One might wonder what the danger is if we don't divide our duties well. I think the great danger is this, precisely that we live very divided lives. That we end up being like the proverbial two ships passing in the night. That we're just going along on our own track because obviously we've got our own things to do. And isn't this the great danger that we constantly find ourselves facing? We're so busy, we're trying to stay afloat. And we're not experiencing our lives really as united in one project. So the whole point of being intentional in deliberating together about how to divide duties is precisely so that we might better do what we got married to do, to make one life together. That's the whole point of the division, is that we might better weave and craft the one whole of the shared life of marriage and household.